Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. This is the weekly recap for week 47. We have a jam-packed episode. We're going to dig into how do you measure a sense of belonging, what is the dead internet theory and what should we be thinking about it, about a gym in Manhattan that is being coined as a unicorn factory, what that could mean for co-working. We're also going to dive into some really cool stuff from Nexudus. But before we do that, I am joined by my guest co-host today, Carlos Almansa, co-founder and CEO of Nexudus. Carlos, how are you?
Hector, thanks for having me. Yeah, all good.
Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Carlos, you just came back from the Coworking Europe conference in Berlin. What did you land up doing there? Were you mostly in the sessions or were you having conversations with customers and partners? Where were you spending most of your time at the conference?
Yeah, so what I like of these conferences is talk to people. Obviously, there is also great content, but the best part for me is always like to catch up with people. Many of them they've been in the industry like us for so many years, so it's an excuse to see each other.
It's actually what I love most about the conferences. Most of the time, you'll find me in the corridor, at the lunches, grabbing coffee with people. That's where I really love coming together with so many people at these conferences. This conference must have been really interesting for you guys because not only did you sponsor the newsletter this week, but you also rolled out a whole new sort of offering, an assessment, a tool. Tell us a little bit more about what is the Coworking Compass assessment.
Yeah, so for us, the Coworking Compass is basically a tool for coworking operators. And the idea is that they can basically see where they are in different areas of the business, anywhere from operations to revenue management, pricing, and such. But with the idea of contextualizing that data within the industry and also to provide them with insights so that they can improve the way they run the space and they can grow their spaces as well.
Very interesting. So folks who want to take part in that, open up the newsletter or go to thisweekincoworking.com, click on week 47, and there's a nice orange banner there that will take you straight to the assessment. When people get there, Carlos, what kind of information are you asking?
Yeah, so basically we divided the assessment in different areas. As I mentioned earlier, anything from space utilizations, where we basically ask them about the size of their space, how many members they have, and such, to then contextualize that within the industry. And then you have like operations, Wi-Fi, and legal. So do they have any legal agreements with their members? Do they use e-signature and things like that? So the idea is to give them like a comprehensive report in different areas, not so much only pricing or revenue management. Because at
That
the
is
end of the day,
interesting.
I think at the end of the day, running a co-working space is quite complex. So it touches like so many different things. So we wanted to dive in those nuances, basically.
Got it. And just to confirm, it's open to anyone, right? They don't have to be a Nexus powered space
No, no,
to
no, for
take part
sure.
in the Compass.
No, it's open to any co-working operator that it's at any stage. So how we structure is we identify different phases that an operator goes through from foundation to scale up to the mature. And we try to give them insight specific to the phase where they are at any point in time with the idea that they can scale to the next phase, if it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So once they've submitted this information, it's not really a survey, right? You're actually benchmarking it against data. Tell us a little bit more about where this data is coming from that you're benchmarking against.
Yeah, so we've been in the industry now for 13 years. Back in, I think it was 2021, we put together a benchmarking project called FlexSpace Observatory, which we have recently updated. That will be published in a couple of weeks. But basically, it was aggregated data to look at different regions and specific things like meeting room bookings, memberships, and such. But one of the main takeaways was the impact of COVID. But now that we have updated all that data, we've seen things like how hot desking, for example, has growth after COVID and such. So the idea is once they complete the assessment, we try to contextualize their use case to the industry data so that we can provide more bespoke insights to their day-to-day, if it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it takes around 10 minutes to complete this information input. What do I get straight away once I hit that last submit button?
So, I mean, when you submit it, you get an email saying that we'll get in touch in a few days. On the background, we basically work on a bespoke report. So at the end of the process, they will get 17 pages report with the specific insights per space in this case.
That's really cool. And of course, reports, whenever we hear reports in the co-working or commercial real estate world, we're always like, okay, how much? Is this going to cost me?
We thought about this as a tool for the industry. So for us, it's also a way of like starting a conversation and understand a bit better their challenges and where they are at the moment. So obviously the report for us wouldn't be the end point, as in we want to understand a bit better their priorities, their challenges, so that then we can provide more insights and suggestions, if it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just to confirm, it is completely free. So they don't have
It
to
is
be an
free,
Nexudus
yeah.
customer.
So
they have to give you 10 minutes
No.
and they get a report.
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, we open for like the first 100, if I remember. So yeah, it's still live.
Got it. Cool. So if you are hearing this and you do get there and the first 100 are gone, well, you should have acted faster. But if you aren't, definitely submit your information. I'm sure the Nexus team will do their best to get you that report. So, Carlos, should we dig into some of the news from this week?
Definitely, that's sweet.
Perfect. Once again, it was a packed week, a lot of market moves, a lot of data drops from around the world. We had a celebration out of New Zealand of a platform celebrating their 15th birthday. So Flex is definitely growing up everywhere. One of the first pieces that caught Carlos's attention, and obviously mine, I'm a big fan of Kat Johnson's, is this idea of asking 12 questions around belonging. Kat put together a summary of the 12 questions that Eileen Kennedy Moore, who's a psychologist, put together around helping children figure out whether they feel a sense of belonging somewhere. And Kat kind of rephrased it into this world of adults also need a sense of belonging. Adults also need to feel like they belong where they work and that they're comfortable and they're wanted and that they're not, outsiders. I love using analogies from children's psychology when thinking about co-working. But Carlos, what caught your eye about this piece? Like, why was it one of the first things that you were like, I really like this piece?
Yeah, I mean, to me, we've been for so many years talking about community within co-working spaces, and the sense of belonging, it's what makes the difference when you join a community. Also, at the Coworking Europe conference, I remember Liz Elam talking about the solitude crisis. And I think co-working in that sense, it's a good environment to fight that. To me, the sense of belonging to a community, in this case, it's one of the things that makes co-working different.
Yep, I completely agree. And there is this, it's very interesting because there's also this divide happening, and it's very subtle right now between community co-working, community-focused spaces and brands, and like the corporate, commoditized, on-demand space. And we'll get a little bit more into that when we kind of dig into this idea of the dead internet theory that I also put in the newsletter this week. But before we get to that, some of the questions that Kat put in this article is, do you find yourself pretending when you're in a space, right? Do you find yourself pretending that you're somebody else? Do other folks seem interested in talking to you? Because we are at a point where there are so many different types of co-working spaces in almost every city or every town, where there's probably a better fit if you're in a space that you're not answering yes or positively to these questions. I always love going back to this idea of co-working is like watching kids play like before pre-K, because they play next to each other and they learn from each other, but they don't play together. And that's how community is in co-working, right? You work next to other businesses, you work near them, you see them, you learn from them, but you're not necessarily working on the same thing. And I always love like refreshing my lens on co-working by looking at it that way and imagining us all as little babies in diapers, working next to each other, as opposed to playing with the same toys.
And I think in that sense, the onboarding, the first 2 weeks are critical to me. So to make you feel comfortable at the space. So operators or like space managers, community managers, they play a huge role on that, right? So making people feel welcome to the space and to the community. But
That's a
like
very good
different
point.
experiences as co-worker, from co-working spaces where you were introduced the first day to others that they have like a different policy and people are more like independent and such. So yeah, at the end of the day, probably you need to find your community, the one that is right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's days where I just want to put my headphones on and write code, and there's are specific spaces where I know nobody's going to want to talk to me in that space, and that's perfectly fine for that
And
work.
that's fine. Yeah.
And it's also this kind of shift of like we're choosing workspaces depending on what's happening outside of our lives. So like I have to pick my kid up and take him to soccer or whatever it is, or what do I need to do today? What do I need to do in the workspace? Do I need to record a podcast? Do I need to write some code? Do I want to just go and sit somewhere and you eat the frog, right? Do the stuff that are boring, but I have to go in somewhere and do it, get out of the house, get out of my family's way. But I don't mind talking to people while I do that. And so you have this ecosystem of work. And I think we're starting to start seeing the fundamentals of that. But you bring up a very valid point about the initial onboarding. Right? As a community manager, if you are building that community space, are you asking these questions? How do you make someone feel comfortable if that's what they're looking for? And there was another link in the newsletter this week actually talking about something Sarah Travis at WorkBoss said about how you've got 90 days. Like if you keep someone for over 90 days, the chance of retention goes up by 75%. Those 90 days is when you've got that chance to make someone feel this is the right community for me. This is where I belong. So much so that she's asked her CFO to actually just make it 50% off for the first 3 months, right? If you cannot keep that customer past those 90 days, maybe they're not a good fit. Maybe this isn't the right community for them, and that's fine too. I think a lot of operators get trapped in the trap of every customer who walks through the door, we have to sell them, we have to close them. It's okay for people not to be the right fit for your space, and it's okay for you to feel that your space is not the right fit for everybody who walks through your door all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those 90 days are for both parties a good chance to understand if they're a fit for each other, right? And touching on what you were saying about focus areas and such, I think that's an evolution also we've seen in the industry. Like 10 years ago, the space itself, I mean, you will have more open areas. Now more and more you can see like focus areas, like small offices or offices, phone booths that were not that common back in the day. So yeah, I think in that sense, the industry has evolved to have like a more diverse layout within the spaces as well.
Yeah, and it's also the spaces are getting bigger. Back in 2013,
Yeah,
when I
that
came
too,
into the
for
industry,
sure.
like a space was either a focus space, or it was a community space, or it was offices. Like now you have multi-floor offerings where this floor is the focus room, this part of the space is the meditation and yoga. Like this is fairly new for folks who've been in the industry since the early days, where spaces are now big enough that you can move within the space and find those focus zones or find those different activity-based zones, which wasn't always the case, right? There are a lot of indie operators who came into this and their space was the community space and someone else's space was the focus space. I don't think I've ever seen one like that in a very long time, but really, really interesting. Talking about this idea of niche spaces though, there was another link in the newsletter that wasn't strictly co-working, but co-working adjacent. This is from Brian, who was the founder over at Yext. He's now building up another company, and he's talking about this gym that he went to in Manhattan. It's called Chelsea Pierce Fitness. And he's saying that the people in there are using the gym and the amenities of the gym as a workspace, as a, everyone there is hustling, everyone's making calls. I mean, it's very interesting because as someone who was going to the gym to get away from my work, that would be very annoying to me. But I guess this is just a new type of community, a new type of, people coming together. And it's really interesting because we're seeing a lot of co-working spaces. I mean, I believe Ministry in the UK, very much in this kind of built around the gym mentality. You have Lifetime across the US really marrying their gym and their workspace offerings. So going back to the early co-working model where a specific space is for a specific use. This space is for people who want to work out and sell. These spaces for people who want a quiet zone. This place is for people who want to take photos and record media and create content, right? These are all different types of spaces that are now breaking back out of that monolithic 3-floor co-working space. But yeah, are you seeing this as well? Are you seeing this explosion from the platform side of nicheification?
Yeah, I think in terms of niche, we've seen a lot of niche spaces since we started back in 2012. So maker spaces were like big, you have shared kitchens, but also gyms as well. So it shows, I think, how diverse is kind of co-working offering and communities in general. But also, I think in the last few years, wellness is becoming more and more important. So it's kind of embedding into the work environment, so to speak. So in our office, for example, there is downstairs there is a gym, and some people they use it after work or before they come to work. So in that sense, I think it reflects how people in the last few years are more into wellness and exercise and such.
Yeah, it's very interesting adaptation. I mean, I've visited spaces where there's saunas, I've visited spaces where there's plunge pools, I've visited spaces where they have paddleboard or pickleball courts. Like everyone's trying to figure out what is that community element, and it's shifted very much away from everyone crowding around the kombucha tap or playing mini football or playing pool. It's now kind of shifted to more of this wellness focus, which is also a really interesting evolution of spaces. But I did want to ask you, as someone who leads a tech company, there was obviously very big news in the AI world this week. We saw the drop of Gemini 3, we saw the drop of the new GPT LLM. Some of the demos were really, really interesting. The thing that caught my eye is how much quicker and more elegant it's become to vibe code software. In my day job at Syncaroo, when we work with operators and their Gen Z workforce is coming in and being like, I don't want to use that app. I can just create something in this vibe coding app. What are your thoughts around vibe coding as a leader of a tech company? Is this something that's great for our industry, or is it a huge problem that no one's looking at?
For me personally, as a non-technical founder, our co-founder is more technical, he's the CTO. But I love prototyping. For that, I think vibe coding is great. Once you get into the details is when it becomes a bit more challenging or difficult. I think in terms of AI in general and within the industry in particular, there is a lot of interest, but the industry is not that informed at the moment. I think we need to spend some more time understanding the technology behind any tool in particular, because at the end of the day, the fundamentals, they are quite common within all those tools to then understand how you can apply to your specific day-to-day use case. I think for us, where it's working best is when you find a specific use case that you can provide all the context, because at the end of the day, many of these tools are as good as the context they can get. So if you can give them the right context, they are very good at finding answers. So one thing, for example, we implemented some time ago was the help desk automation. So you basically have like a database of FAQs with questions like, how do I connect to the Wi-Fi? How do I print and such? And for those things, the AI is quite good, like finding the answer when it's got the context. For more like general tools that are solving like a complex problem, I would say the technology is probably not there yet. Industry, as it's important to understand these technologies, the fundamentals behind them, and then find the use cases, the specific use cases where they can apply them, other than try to sort it out everything with AI, which at the moment is not possible.
Yep. I agree with that. It's interesting because a lot of folks are starting to see vibe coding coming in at the community level, community manager level, wanting to create apps that they can use to speak to members. And Of course, they miss the whole gap of this has to speak to your centralized database, it has to be secure, it has to be compliant, it has to be all these things. But the questions are starting to be raised, right? We're starting to see it across the globe where people are like, okay, what is our vibe coding policy? How do we implement something that protects the business, protects the IP? Like, who owns a vibe coded software, right? If a community manager does it and it's generated by a system, but they work for a co-working space, who owns that code? What I've found really, really interesting is that a lot of operators as companies are adding AI onto the front, to the client side, right? Speaking, prospecting, sales processing, all of that stuff. But what we're also seeing is more and more calendar apps, more and more HR software, a lot more systems are implementing AI agents on the other side to go and make the inquiries, to go and get the information, to go and find out what the pricing is and to make the booking. And we're seeing, agentic e-commerce coming in. We're seeing MasterCard and Visa starting to deploy their payment rails for agentic commerce. And we're getting to this point where at some point, it's just going to be bots talking to bots, right? And this is what the whole dead internet theory idea is at some point, if everything becomes automated, there's no space in the noise for human interaction. So we're starting to see it now. If you go post something, or just go scroll through your LinkedIn, right? There is at least 10 to 20 posts that you're going to see that were generated by AI. If you go into those comments, at least 50% of the comments will be AI generated comments. And then the interaction, the connection, the LinkedIn, the cold outreach, the messages, that's all AI agents speaking to AI agents. And you get to a point where are the humans involved in this relationship, right? And this is this whole idea that it's called the dead internet theory. There was a great post by Andrew who put together this idea that when the internet becomes noisier and noisier because every system, every platform, every social channel becomes convoluted with bot noise, where do humans go? And where they go is to real life events. They go to meetups, they go to conferences, they go to co-working spaces. And so as scary as this idea is of like being unable to use your social media because it's just bots talking to bots, there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to go back to what we started with, right? What Kat Johnson was saying about belonging, what the 90 days timer you have, giving people a reason to step away from the noise that is online right now, and it's only going to get noisier, to step into a place with humans where they can connect, let the systems talk to each other, let the bookings do that thing, let their social media go on autopilot. But that means that they're speaking to the person sitting next to them, having a coffee. And I think that is the positive light of this whole internet theory. What did you think about this? I mean, it's just a fascinating thought experiment.
Yeah, I mean, first, I can guarantee I'm not an avatar, I'm a real person.
That's
I mean,
exactly what an avatar would say.
yeah, that's fair point. I'm not an expert on this theory, to be honest. I was curious to understand a bit better what it meant. Funny enough, this morning I was listening to the radio and they were interviewing Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. Many of the concerns that he shared about AI and such is what you mentioned, about the information that we find on internet and things like that. On this scenario where everything is AI or bots and such, that could be, as you said, an opportunity for co-working spaces, but also it tells you the importance of a co-working space to be embedded within the local community. At the end of the day, the members probably come from the local community. Person-to-person interaction is what makes the difference. So we are in a people industry. In that post-apocalyptic scenario, there is an opportunity for growth for co-working spaces.
Yeah, I also think it's a growth for the technology in our industry, right? Because someone's going to create automations for LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, but very few people are going to create automations for Nexudus community portal or the chat app, or most spaces are not going to let bots into their Slack channels, right? So it does create quieter spaces on the internet that are curated by these co-working spaces. And I feel that might be a very big opportunity for the tech in our industry to really protect that, right? To create that oasis of this is a safe space. Like, you're not going to come in here and have an auto bot message everyone in the co-working space offering them your accounting services, right? It's only so many times that someone can do that before that is put to a stop. Whereas because it's smaller, it's controllable. So that's a really interesting kind of benefit to these co-working spaces, where you have these online interactions, but they are more private. And we're starting to see this in personal lives. People are like having tiny social network apps just for their family, just for connecting with their loved ones. And I think co-working could fill into that gap, where this is your work circle that isn't marketing, right? It isn't constantly look at me, look at me, look at me. It's actually connecting through a digital platform.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in that sense, I think operators and co-working spaces, they are they care a lot about their communities, and they keep them like close, safe, probably the noise outside. So they try to curate everything, obviously, from the community itself, the members, but also the content that they share with their members. It's specific to the community. I think definitely there is an opportunity there.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for joining me again today.
No, thank you.
To Nexudus for sponsoring this week's newsletter, podcast, game, all of it, making this information freely available to everyone all around the co-working world. So thanks again from all of us to you and your team.
No, thanks.
We'll be back in the podcast feed next week. Everybody have a great weekend and have a great week. We will be back and we'll see you soon.